Hey, what's up guys? How you doing? So today's video is going to be a little different from my normal videos. Normally I'm going to be sitting and talking about plants, but today's video is going to explore a different subject, one that I'm very interested in. So I'm in Yonkers right now. I'm in Yonkers, northwest Yonkers. I'm by Untermyer Park, Odell Avenue, the reservoir trail. And what am I talking about today? Well, it's going to be a little different than normal. One of my great sort of interests is true crime. Okay, maybe some of you might want to turn this off at this point. But it's always been one of my sort of obsessions growing up into my adult years. Just reading about criminal history and stuff like that. And of course, growing up in the North Bronx, South Yonkers area, one of the things that we always learned about was, or I should say that was always whispered about, was the Son of Sam case. And of course, the Son of Sam case took place in 1976 and 1977. But what few people know is that it actually spanned the years probably 1950 to really the present. Why? Because the story most people have heard about it, David Berkowitz, the talking dog, that story was complete bullshit. Sorry to break the news to you guys, but the truth is, Berkowitz was one part of the story, a big part, no doubt. But in the grand scheme of things, he was just a bit player in the whole thing. Berkowitz was a member of a cult, a satanic cult that operated, well, right on this trail that you see right here. In addition to other places in Westchester and Long Island and Manhattan. It was actually a nationwide thing. I suggest that you read a great book called The Ultimate Evil by Maury Terry, who wrote the book in, I'd say he wrote it about 87, and he updated it in 96, and unfortunately recently passed a few years ago, and was a very reclusive person apparently. I've tried to get in touch with him, never had any luck. He was very hesitant to share his findings with many people and discuss the case with many people. So even though I was sort of obsessed with this case and learned a lot about it on my own, through investigations of my own, talking about 15 years ago, 16 years ago now, I had a very strange period with this case where I ran into a lot of people who were involved and who knew a lot and told me stories. Some of which I can get into in this video and some of which unfortunately I can't. But you should definitely read Maury Terry's Ultimate Evil to get a good primer on the story. So let's take a look at what we got going on here. I'm just going to change the microphone so you can still hear me. Alright, so we're on the reservoir trail right now, and we're just north of Untermyer Park. Untermyer Park plays a huge part in this story. Why? Because the satanic cult that sort of got its nucleus in the late 50s, but really started coming together in the late 60s and early 70s. By the time Berkowitz came around, this cult was very well established, had already done a lot of evil stuff in these beautiful areas that you're seeing right here. Now, what are we talking about? I don't want to freak anyone out, so if you have children, you may want to put them to bed or put them away. If you're squeamish, you may not want to watch this. This is not a gardening video. But they would sacrifice people. They would kill people in these woods right here. And a lot of the people that were killed were runaway kids, kids with no known family, or kids from the Midwest who somehow ended up in New York. Right next to this park, Untermyer Park, which we're going to be coming up to fairly soon, is an orphanage where they would grab kids And actually, in speaking to people who were kind of aware of some of these things, it was known in the mid-70s that there was a black van driving around kidnapping kids. And while I have no actual proof that that was involved in any of it, it does ring a little bit true that they would use these kids in late night rituals, and these sick people would sacrifice them. They would actually kill them. And of course they used runaways because no one ever really followed up or cared about them too much. This reservoir trail right here connects to a couple of very, very key spots in our story. Untermyer Park, David Berkowitz's apartment. We're going to walk down to all that stuff today. And of course, a house owned by a family called the Carrs. C-A-R-R. The Carrs play an integral part in the Son of Sam story for multiple reasons. But we'll get into that in a second. Right here we're seeing Untermyer Park. Now, you can't really go in there unless you have all the masks and all the tickets. I'm hoping that they still have it open down here. I'm starting to get a little bit nervous that they don't. Oh, damn it. They closed this off and put fencing around. That really sucks. This used to be completely open. Wooded like crazy. And unfortunately it's locked and closed. But I was gonna take you up into this place. Untermyer Park, right here. This house you see right here. This abandoned house, I was gonna go in. Unfortunately, I'll just have to show pictures from stock photos from the internet, because this is actually a famous spot in this story. This is one of the spots where the cult would meet late at night and do their thing. Now, every night they weren't killing people, but whenever they would meet, they would have these rituals here. If it wasn't a person they were doing something to, it was a goat or a dog. They found a lot of dead German shepherds on these trails back in the 70s. And nobody knew what the hell was going on. Because who would have, right? Who thinks like that? And especially in the 70s, nobody knew really what was happening late at night. There was no surveillance cameras. People were a lot freer to do a lot more back then. And of course, unfortunately, one of those things was, well, sacrificing people in the middle of the night. So, unfortunately, we can't get in there. I would have shown you all the cracks and crevices and little hidden dungeon rooms. So this is unfortunate, but I guess I shouldn't be surprised. So this house is one of the places. Now, Untermyer Park was a big, big spot for these sick people. They destroyed it, but right in these hills and right going up those hills was a place called the Devil's Cave, which I'll show a picture of course. And the Devil's Cave was another area. It was underground. And that was where they would do the seriously hardcore, nasty stuff. So why am I interested in this story, you may ask? That's a good question. Well, I'm interested in true crime, first of all. I'm interested in reading the stories behind all these things. And one of the things I really enjoy is reality. I believe the official story too, that Berkowitz was programmed to kill by a talking dog, by the neighbors. Oh yeah, I still got to talk about the Carrs. I will. In fact, it was the Carrs' dog that supposedly, the Carr family had a dog named Sam, and supposedly it was that dog that was speaking to Berkowitz, telling him to go out and kill young women. Now, first of all, if you look at the victims, quite a few were young women, but plenty of them were men. Plenty of them were killed outside of lovers' lanes. They said it was a lovers' lane thing. Quite a few of the shootings were just in the middle of the street randomly. And some of them, the first one, the Loria killing, was a woman who was actually known to the cult. She was I guess a teenager, and her friend, I think it was Donna DeMasi, was in the car with her. So that wasn't a lover's lane thing. So that story got out first. It was a lover's lane. Also, one of the things that they said was that it was a guy killing brunettes. Right, so everybody went and dyed their hair blonde, cut their hair short. It's another myth. If you look at the list of people shot, very few of them were you know, pure brunettes. There were some blondes. Had nothing to do with that. The Son of Sam killings were a satanic ritual, essentially gone amok. They were planned by not only the cult itself, but by the people who sort of led the cult, which were not teenagers. They were very established people, lawyers, judges, doctors, who lived in these wealthy areas that were just into sick stuff. So the cult was actually killing people to terrorize New York City. That was the stated goal. And they certainly did. But unfortunately, everybody got so freaked out about what was essentially a fairy tale. It kind of sounds familiar to today, actually. Another moral panic that we're in the midst of. But the Carrs had this dog, Sam, that supposedly talked to Berkowitz and told him to kill. Well, of Sam Carr. Actually, I made a mistake before. The dog wasn't called Sam. The dog was called Harvey. It was the father of the family, Sam Carr, and he had two sons, Michael and John, which we're going to show you pictures of, and we're going to show you composites of suspects. Very interesting how they look very similar. That's because John was one of the shooters, and Michael was most likely one of the shooters as well. It's a very interesting story. Now, this water tower here along the reservoir, it used to, oh, there we go. Now it's hard to see, but in the graffiti you can make out a 44. That's a very old graffiti. That dates back to the Son of Sam years, 44, because they were passing. Here's another 44. They were passing a 44 caliber Magnum pistol around the group, and that was what was doing all the that was what was shooting. So they were giving little hints and tips here, just nobody realized it. They were putting their graffiti up. So where are we walking down to? Let's see if there's anything over here. No. But in the old days you could get into these structures, and so they used to do a lot of dog killing in there. They would find German shepherds all skinned alive and goats skinned alive along this passageway. So the Carrs were a family that lived on Warburton Avenue, and we're going to approach their house fairly soon, just a little bit down the ways here. And we'll look at Berkowitz's building as well. And John and Michael were some sick kids. They were older. They were by the time Son of Sam came out, they were in their late 20s, early 30s. And no one knows exactly how long prior Berkowitz actually met these people, but by his own admission, he met Michael in 1975 at a party in his building. He was just sitting on the sidewalk smoking a cigarette or just hanging out. I don't quite remember the details of that. But Michael came out and smoked a cigarette. Two struck up a conversation. It got into the whole idea of mysticism. Berkowitz was invited up to the party, and at that point he became part of this group. This group would meet in Van Cortlandt Park, Pelham Bay Park, and Untermyer Park. And in those three parks, they would do their rituals. I have not found the exact spot in Van Cortlandt yet where they did it. But here in Untermyer, it was basically in that place that you just saw. And of course in the Devil's Cave, which has been completely demolished. So interesting houses here, beautiful architecture. I'll show you that one. Very interesting part of New York. A lot of I mean, look at the size of that house up there. Kind of hard to see. Things like a mansion. Maybe when we get closer, we'll take a look. But anyway, the Carrs were, you know, fairly well-known family. We'll be showing you their house soon. And it's just an interesting story all around because what you heard in the media was not the truth. And this myth, of course, is still persisting to this day. And it's a dangerous one because people thought that once Berkowitz was off the streets, that the danger was over. And that was not true. People still continue to get shot afterwards, except they just attributed it to other people. They didn't connect it back. In Long Island, there were a series of satanic murders. Remember, this happened all in the 70s and 80s. That was kind of the milieu back then. You know, heavy metal, Black Sabbath, the Wicker Man movie. And of course, Wicker, the word Wicker plays a role in this whole story because in the Son of Sam letters, which were not written by David Berkowitz, they're neither in his handwriting nor his writing style. They actually give 4 aliases of the murderer or murderers, shooters in the Son of Sam case. One of them was the Duke of Death. Okay, they think that maybe that was Michael Carr. One of them was John Wheaties. John Wheaties, okay. Wheaties was John Carr's middle nickname. Everybody called him Wheaties. So his name was right in there. If anybody knew him, they could have told him right then and there, the police. Then you had Wicked King Wicker. And we're going to be coming up on Wicker Street pretty soon. Wicker Street, of course, is the road that connects David Berkowitz's house to the Carr's house. And in this letter, this is kind of nice, little ravine here. In this letter to Jimmy Breslin, I believe it was 1977, they talk about how there's dead bodies buried behind the writer's house, and if it was the Carr's house, well then it's very, very likely that there were dead bodies buried behind the Carr's house, which we are coming up to fairly soon. 316 Warburton Avenue is the address. Anyway, when we hit it, we'll show you. So it's a highly interesting story. Very nice architecture around here. Very sort of secluded area. You can easily see how things could pop off in this area, especially back in the 70s. Now, Yonkers was known as a really crazy place. I guess it's calmed down since then. But back then, it just felt lawless. I remember hanging out in Yonkers quite often with friends, and you'd be on the street and some dude from the neighborhood would drive down his IROC Z at 100 miles an hour down the road trying to run everybody over. And if you didn't move, you were run over. I mean, that's the kind of people you're dealing with here, especially in those years. All right, we're coming up on Wicker, I believe, and we're coming up on the Carr household. Nope, this is Arthur, so I was wrong. Anyhow, so how did I get into this story? Well, like everybody, I believed the official story. I believed Berkowitz did it alone and all that stuff, you know, the fairy tale. And then one day when I was in college, I became very good friends with a kid who shall remain nameless. But his father was a fireman in Yonkers in 1977. And he said to him that he responded to a fire in David Berkowitz's apartment just 2 or 3 days before he was arrested. Now, when they arrested David Berkowitz, they found writings on his walls, scrawled over everything, holes punched in the wall. This guy told me, this guy's father, Manny, that house was pristine 2 days before there was that apartment. There was absolutely nothing indicating that a crazy guy lived there. And of course, that then started me on realizing, well, then what's up? And then oh, interesting. I'll get you some plant stuff here. There's some bamboo kind of growing out of control. This ain't cool, man. This is gonna spread everywhere. Anyhow, see it starting to spread down to here. All this bamboo coming out. Let's see where else it's spreading to. It's getting to here. Here it is. Getting to here. All right. Anyhow, what was I talking about? Oh yeah. So he said the place was pristine. So that led me to start researching it. And it's funny how these things work. When you put your intent out there, the universe always responds. That's how I got into gardening, in a sense. I wanted to sort of become a gardener, wanted to change my life, and the ad for the Wave Hill job came across my desk. And before even placing the ad in the newspaper I was working at the time, I just took that ad, put it in my pocket, and went up to Wave Hill and begged for the job. And I got it, anyhow. And that, of course, changed my life completely. But getting back to the universe and this story, as soon as I started being open to the information, I was meeting person after person who would really, really get into it and say, yeah, my friend was involved, or my friend knew Wheaties. And a picture started to emerge for me, even before I read Maury Terry's book, of a organized group of men, an organized group of men, they were not teenagers, who were into this satanic stuff. And they got the notion, of course, to start terrorizing the people. And they came up with the whole idea of shooting people. And I kind of put it in the back burner for a while. And then, lived my life, did my music stuff, did my jobs, kind of forgot all about it. And then when I hit my 30s, I kind of started getting interested in the whole notion of screenwriting. And I wanted to make a movie about this. I was going to call it 22. The reason why I was going to call it 22, two reasons. One, the group that did this, the satanic cult that did the Son of Sam murders, they called themselves the 22 Disciples of Hell. Okay? Which of course indicates that there was more than one person involved. And then of course 44 was the gun that they used, and 22 is half of 44. So I found that to be an interesting number. And I was gonna write a screenplay and work on it with my boy Mike Schiff, who was a great cinematographer and editor, and he did the video shooting on my first 3 videos on my website here. And anyway, we just never could get it together. Life intervened. I guess we weren't super duper interested really in it. The idea was really cool, but it never happened. But I always wanted in the back of my mind to do something with this story. So now that I'm 47, almost turning 48, and I'm thinking of getting out of New York for good, I figured I'd come up here and at least tell you the story, show you some of the sites involved, and kind of give you a feel for the area in which this all took place. So imagine this place here, dead at night, right? Look at those big houses. This place is gonna be nobody out. These people who live in these places, they don't care. They don't want to get involved with hearing a dog barking for its life, a goat squealing. They don't care. That's just the way it was. Look at all this bamboo. Wow. These people really are taking a chance here. Cool screening, the bamboo, isn't it? But wow. I wonder how far this is gonna travel. Interesting stuff. So you had a lot of ability to do things hidden at night here in this area. And of course people took great advantage of that. Some people say that there's tunnels underneath here which connect to these houses, and that could have been also another mode of moving people back and forth, hiding, dead dogs. Wow, look at the size of that house. Huge. Even the police working this case, many of them knew something was up. In the beginning, you had stories of multiple cars at scenes, different makes and models of vehicles, I should say, not to confuse with the Carr brothers. Even though you did have multiple cars, the brothers at scenes, the composite sketches were all different. Some of them looked like Berkowitz. Most of them didn't. Witness statements all pointed to short and fat, tall and thin. The killer was between 6'6" and 5'4". He had blonde hair, he had curly black hair. So there was some issues. And of course, the only thing tying it all together was the .44 caliber pistol, the gun that the police thought was being used by one person. But in reality, it was being passed along by many people. But the most controversial shooting, and the one that speaks to Berkowitz's innocence in most of these now, Berkowitz. What's the deal with Berkowitz? Well, if you look at Berkowitz's videos from when he was arrested to, well, now, he's probably still making videos. You get the picture of a pathetic loser, a schlub who was lonely, who wanted friends, and who, once he became your friend, he was like a loyal dog and just about as smart as one. Now, I'm not saying that Berkowitz is stupid. It's not what we're getting at. But he was easily persuaded, let's just put it that way. And by his own admission, he became a soldier for this cult. He later came out and said, this was a group of people, guys, it wasn't just me. And so Berkowitz, actually to me, really strikes me as a tragic figure. I hate to say it. He did do 2 of the shootings. He did the Loria shooting and the DiMasi shooting, both in the Bronx. He was from Yonkers in the Bronx, so he said the Bronx was my territory. Okay, that's kind of how he thought. And anyway, where are we? Are we anywhere near Wicker? Wow, we're not. I have to go down a little bit further. Hope I don't get a ticket later. I have 2 hours. I should make it. Anyway, just to give you a feel of like the neighborhood, these big houses, beautiful, absolutely gorgeous architecture. Some of these houses have elevators in them. It's really amazing stuff. Okay, Chenard. All right, I know where we are. We're gonna be hitting Wicker. Probably the next block that we come across like this. So Berkowitz was a pathetic loser, schlub, go along, get along kind of guy. Not too bright, not too dumb. Your average Joe. Let's just put it this way. If he hadn't gotten involved with these guys, he'd be the type of dude who you could sit at a bar with and talk about the Dodgers game and have a nice little conversation like that. And that would be pretty much about it. Maybe get into his thoughts on politics a little bit, but pretty much that's it. And anyway, he took the fall for this group because, as he said, he was a soldier. And also, he knew he was involved, so he just took the fall for it all because, well, these were devious people. They threatened his family, right? These are some sick people, and this cult was nationwide, stretched all the way from New York to North Dakota into, wow, look how beautiful, into California. And anyhow, that's the way it goes. Now there's some other spots here which were integral to our story as well. How you doing, sir? Wicker Street's this way? Wicker?
The car?
Wicker Street?
Oh, I don't know.
You don't know? Okay, thank you.
I say
Phillips, no, I need to go Wicker. I think it's this way. Thank you. So, yeah, it's down here. Look at these houses. I mean, could use a little bit of paint job, but how beautiful, right? Look at this neighborhood. It could be, you know, way upstate. So we're getting close. Anyhow. So So yeah, he took the fall, and then in jail he became a devout Christian, and now he calls himself the Son of Hope. And the truth is, pretty much everybody believes he's sincere, that he's really sorry for what he did. He feels horrible. He thinks that it was a dumb, stupid mistake, which of course it was. But he's not the crazy lunatic that people painted him out to be. I'm not saying I'm sympathetic to him. He shot 2 people, don't get me wrong. Okay? But there's a tragedy to his story as well. Because in reality, he was not a bad guy. He was just a kind of a schlub who got involved with the wrong people and took it too far. So there's a cautionary tale there for people, of course. Try not to get too involved in bad stuff. When you see it happening, extricate yourself. He started going to little rituals in Van Cortlandt Park, he said. And at first it was just partying. He was just happy to be around girls. But then all of a sudden they started doing the dog sacrifices. And then pretty soon they were doing the human sacrifices. And he just was in too deep. Yeah, we're coming to Wicker, the next street. And he got involved in the wrong thing. And he also really believed in this satanic crap too. See, the people who were involved at the higher ups of this cult, they didn't really believe in the Satanism like the kids did, right? Or the people in their 20s did. They were interested in other things that the cult was involved in. What was the cult involved in? Well, the cult had all sorts of ties into the police, into the medical field, into the lawyers and judges, and they were also interested in drug dealing, and I hate to say it, but child pornography. That was a huge part of the deal as well. So they would oftentimes get kids and use them in these rituals and do all sorts of nasty stuff, which I'm not gonna talk about or get into because it's very distasteful. I think you can get the impression what we're talking about. And these streets was where a lot of it was happening. So we're definitely coming up on the Carr household, because I'm almost 100% sure that this is Wicker Street. So we'll go look at the Carr house today. Now, the Carrs had a sister named Wheat. Of course, that's where one of the places where the nickname came from. Her brother was called Wheaties, but the sister was named Wheat, W-H-E-A-T. And she worked for the police of Yonkers. And interestingly enough, she's the person who tipped off New York City that Berkowitz was involved. It's a really cool story that you should actually read about. Highly, highly interesting to those of you who are interested in true crime. Well, I was wrong again. This is not Wicker Street. Whoops. Getting kind of far from Untermyer, but we gotta be getting close. I think it's gonna be the next one. Anyway, I hope you're hanging with me on this story. So 1975 comes around. These guys are in the middle of the woods in Van Cortlandt doing their bullshit little satanic rituals, killing chickens, you know, doing that kind of stuff. They start ramping it up in 76 a little bit, you know, and then they come up with the notion of going out and terrorizing New York City. And that's what they did. Berkowitz did the first shooting, the Donna Lauria shooting in 1976. And then from then on, it was a cast of characters. And we'll show you composite sketches, we'll show you all that stuff. Now, over the years, I have come across people who have given me names of people involved. And I've investigated and I've come to the conclusion that that was real. Over the years, I have met people who I know were involved. Maybe not directly with shooting, but people who knew John Carr, people who knew David Berkowitz, people who were very natural in using these people's names. And then when they realized that I was interested more in the story, they got real nervous and shut up. I met people in bars who I would speak to, and all of a sudden I was getting my life threatened because I was talking names and I was talking about places. The biggest part of the story at the end was the shooting of Stacy Moskowitz. I think I sort of brought it up earlier and didn't finish. Here's the Carr house. We're gonna get to it. This is definitely Wicker Street. So this gray right here, well, it's hard to see. We'll get up closer to it. But this is the Carr house right here. This is the famous house where the Carrs lived, and where it seemed as if, this house right here, it seemed as if the Son of Sam letters were being written from inside this house, just describing. It would say, behind our house, in the attic, we're chained, and my father locks us in closets, and so on and so forth. Just weird, bizarre stuff. So the Moskowitz shooting was the one that speaks to Berkowitz's innocence the most. There's Berkowitz's apartment building, right there. That's where David Berkowitz lived. He lived in, I believe, the second to last floor on this side, in that apartment, right there. And they've since changed the address to a different number. But I know I'm going to talk about Moskowitz, don't worry. But they've since changed the number. It used to be 35 and now it's 42. So in the Wicked King Wicker was one of the aliases of the shooter. And right here, I'll go right up to it. You can see this is Wicker Street. Leads down to the highway. There's the Carr house in the distance. We'll walk in front of it. I'll walk back along the highway, the roads. Wicker Street. We're on Wicker and Grove. Interestingly enough, so the Carr's dog was shot at. And that was attributed to Berkowitz, but of course the witnesses said it was a tall blonde dude with long stringy hair. About as far you can get from Berkowitz as possible. In these houses here, I believe it was this one, but I could be wrong. They also shot into this house, narrowly, almost missing someone and killing someone as well. In this house here on Wicker. So yeah, Wicker was no joke. This whole area was no joke back in the day. Still kind of sketchy, so I'm taking some chances bringing you this video here. But I did want to show you some of the hot spots of the Son of Sam. Now I could go to Pelham Bay Park, I could go to Van Cortlandt Park. I can show you all sorts of stuff. Oh, interesting. Little community garden. Wicker Community Garden. Thank you for all to keeping it green. See, this is what I like to see. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. These are new. There used to be row houses just like those up there going down this entire road. So I could bring you to all those places, but I just basically wanted to show you the main spots. I could drive to all the shooting locations, but well, really, what's the point? You could look that up online. I just wanted to show you, you know, in 2021, what these areas look like now. So this is the Carr house. Right here. 316 Wicker, Warburton Avenue. Okay, and in that house the Carr family lived. Sam, Francis, the husband and wife, and their 3 kids, John, Wheat, and Michael. Here's 316 right there. And they ran a bunch of businesses out of there. They ran a telephone, like a switchboard. Not exactly sure how that worked out. I want to go down here actually to Ravine Avenue because that's an area where it figures into the Moskowitz story. And this is a new thing. I don't even think anyone really knows the story I'm about to hit. I promise I will get back to Moskowitz. So, all right, maybe I'll start the Moskowitz story. So, the last shooting was the Stacy Moskowitz, and it took place in Bensonhurst in Brooklyn, by the water. And Berkowitz, of course, was arrested for that. Why? Because he got a parking ticket in the area. But the thing is, although he was in the area, he was not a shooter on that job. He was, by his own admission, a scout. Now, you know what you're saying. Well, that's his own admission. Well, the fact is, if you do a forensic study, and Maury Terry goes into this in his book, if you do a forensic study of movements and how long it takes to get from where his car was to the shooting site, and if you also do listen to witnesses who saw him literally like a minute or two before the shooting in a completely different area, and they have him dead to rights. It was his car. They described what he was wearing perfectly. He was nowhere near the shooting scene. In fact, by his own admission, he knew that he had been spotted. He knew that he had been given the parking ticket. He was trying to call off the killings. But the true shooters were brought in from out of town, apparently, and they were driving in a yellow Volkswagen, okay? Now, yellow Volkswagen. If you talk to people around Yonkers, everybody knew about the yellow Volkswagen. Why? Because it was a community car that was passed around all these people, and it was used in some of the other shootings as well. Now, I'm not going to give names, and I'm not going to say anything about who told me this story. Excuse me. But apparently the owners of the yellow Volkswagen were a couple who lived here on Ravine Avenue. And this is where the car was stored, in the back of these houses right here. So nobody could ever see it. But all of New York was looking for a yellow Volkswagen. Okay, and what's interesting about that is that Berkowitz drove a cream-colored Ford Fairlane. It was the car that he was arrested in. So about as different as you can get. Okay, I'll show pictures of those two cars. So Ravine Avenue does play a little tangential role. There's Berkowitz's building in the distance right up there. Ravine Avenue plays a role in this whole story that not many people, if any, know about. And who knows about how much these people are still alive anymore. But I'm trying to keep my head, if you know what I mean. So I'm not going to get into names. I do know names. I've never told anybody them, and I never plan on it. I'm not that interested in getting so close, in a sense, to the story. But when I was doing my research for my screenplay, boy, did I come across a lot of interesting characters. And so, of course, that led me to the notion that I was on the right track with all this. So, Berkowitz was arrested 10 or 11 days after the Moskowitz shooting. Sorry, I'm a little out of breath. Yonkers is known for its very steep hills. And so I'm walking up them right now. Normally I'm in better shape. However, when you walk and talk, it's not so easy. Look at that, interesting. Berkowitz was arrested 10 or 11 days. And in those 10 or 11 days, there was a lot of frantic activity taking place. Mainly, he knew he was going to get caught. Why? Because he had a parking ticket from the scene of the crime. And any policeman is going to, of course, investigate any parking ticket at any scene of the crime. And they did just that. And eventually, the Yonkers police came calling for David Berkowitz up here in Yonkers. The New York City police ended up calling up here to interview Berkowitz. Who did they speak to when they called up here? Carr. They got her on the phone. Why? Because she was the Yonkers police dispatch person. So she was the one that said to the guy calling. Now, he just thought Berkowitz was a witness. Remember, they were looking for a yellow Volkswagen, and the person they were looking for had blonde hair, stringy blonde hair, and was very thin. Berkowitz, of course, has curly black hair and is very rotund. He also was driving a Ford Fairlane, which was clearly written on the ticket. So they were just looking at him to be a witness. But then Carr told them all the crazy stories of what was happening up here in Yonkers, most of which her brothers were involved with. And she fingered him as the perpetrator, and they came up here and arrested him. And so what's interesting about that is that, again, he was just considered a witness. He wasn't considered a suspect. And he was taken down by one of the Carrs. And so it had already been predetermined. When he got the ticket, the cult said, okay, you're going down, buddy. You're the one taking the fall for this. And like the good soldier he was, he took the fall. Now down there is the Yonkers power plant. That also plays a role in our story. The Yonkers power plant. Now, I haven't been there in years, so I don't know what's happening. I think they were trying to refurbish it to make it into a convention center and destination site. Who's gonna come to the middle of this slum for a destination is beyond me. But anyway, that was their story. But before they started on that place was abandoned for many, many decades. That power plant was one of the two identical ones that provided power for the train line. And back in the 90s, we would go in there all the time. And it was scary and eerie. And you can just feel bad shit happen there. And you'd go into rooms and there'd be satanic graffiti everywhere. And there'd be like piles of human hair on the floor. It was just really weird. And we used to love going in there all the time. And in subsequent years, when I found out, when I started meeting people involved in this story, I was told that the power plant down there was also a spot that in the 70s they'd go in there and they would hang people, they'd kill people. And I believed it. Again, these were very serious people who were doing this. So the power plant's down there with the two smokestacks coming up. So it's easy to dismiss these stories. Look at this nice Chamaecyparis. Beautiful Chamaecyparis. But, and I definitely discounted a few that I heard, but I didn't discount everything. Mainly because it just jibes with my own feelings of everything. And that power plant was a very weird spot. I was also told that the Boyce Thompson mansion, which was abandoned in those years as well, which is now part of Lenoir Preserve area, up on North Broadway, way up that way. Actually, not too far up that way. That was another place where they would go in and do rituals and whatnot. So this was a sick group. They were well established. Apparently they were started in the 1950s by a group of doctors and judges and lawyers who were very, in the upper rung of society, who were into pedophilia. And so supposedly in Untermyer Park there are bodies of kids buried there. And maybe it's an urban myth, but given the history of that place, I don't doubt that that's true. And over the years, they would just groom kids. John Carr apparently got involved with these people in 1964. Okay, he was born in 1946, so he was already 18 years old by the time he got involved. Oh, let's go take a look at this tree. Very beautiful. Yeah, I'll mix in some plant stuff in this, just because we're up here, might as well. So John Carr got involved in the 60s. He started recruiting his friends, and by the time the 70s rolled around, these guys were all in their 30s, and they were well established, and they just took it a little too far. Very beautiful tree here. Looks like a cherry tree to me, some form of weeping cherry. Very beautiful. This is the Hudson River Museum. Look how nice this is. Let's walk up this block here and get back to the trail. Let's take a look at some of these cool houses here. So by the time Berkowitz met these people in '75, it was a well-established group. Now, what's interesting is cross-referencing a lot of this stuff. What do I mean by that? Well, in my research, I shouldn't say research, because it actually had nothing to do with Son of Sam. But one of my other interests is New York City graffiti from the 70s and into the early 80s. And I came across a book by an author whose name is Vincent Fedorchak, who went by the moniker Fuzz One. And Fuzz One wrote 2 books. The first one was called Fuzz One, A Bronx Childhood, which was an excellent, excellent book. One of the reasons why I love that book is because he came to the Bronx at 8 years old, and at 8 years old was living the life on the streets, staying out all night, writing graffiti. And it was just interesting because think about that today, right? I mean, 16-year-old kids aren't even going out now. So anyway, in this book, his first book, A Bronx Childhood, he talks about the Satanists that used to hang out in the Bronx. And a lot of it sounded just like the people who were involved in Son of Sam. He was talking about Satanists hanging out in Van Cortlandt Park, killing kids, all the things that like really rung true because of the knowledge that I had of Son of Sam books. And so another book of his came out called Fuzz One, Last of the Old School. And this book is a must for anybody interested in the Son of Sam story, because in it, he basically gives an eyewitness account of coming across this group in Van Cortlandt Park, actually doing their rituals. There's 2 stories in the book, 3 stories in the book about it. The first is him finding a dead German Shepherd in Van Cortlandt and burying it. And of course that rang super true, because right on this trail here, they were finding dead German Shepherds everywhere in that same time period. And we already know that the Son of Sam group used Van Cortlandt Park. The second story in that book was related to him by a street kid called Ice. All right, and Ice essentially lived on the streets. He was a child prostitute, drug addict, and he would meet people in Van Cortlandt Park in those years, adults, and they would pay him to have sex with him. Yes, folks, this happened. Van Cortlandt Park was a hotbed for that activity. It still might be, for all I know. My only experience with that was a couple experiences. One, I'm walking by down a very similar pathway in Van Cortlandt, and I see some rustling in the woods. So I go over to investigate what it was, and I shouldn't have, because it was one dude boning another dude, and the scars I still have scars from that. And then also one time I rode by on my bicycle, and this guy walking by, he turns to me and he goes, "Sexy." That I just found funny. But anyway, it was known that in Van Cortlandt Park was a very, very big hot spot for cruising and all that type of stuff. So anyway, Ice, getting back to Ice, he related a story to Fuzz One about how he was taken to a party, and in that party he describes it to a T, and he describes grown men raping and killing a teenage boy, and there was a couple girls that were being held captive as well. And so that was a kind of a chilling story. But the culmination of those stories is at the end of the book. And in it, Fuzz One and Ice, along with a friend of theirs, a friend of Fuzz's called Zula, this cool girl who we met working at in those years we had 5 and Dimes in New York City. And she was working there, and she was adventurous. She came out with them. Excuse me. And so they went looking and scoping out for the Satanists. And the end of the book relates the story about how they took the boats in Van Cortlandt Park, they rode up this little stream, and they ended up at what they called a castle, and went in there, and Fuzz 1 saw the same stuff, and they ended up throwing gasoline all over it and burning it up. An entertaining story, not quite how true all of it is, but even if the details are fuzzy, it rings true because of all the stories that I heard, just from people living around here, living in the 70s, coming across dead dogs on this pathway, hearing stories of hearing screaming in the middle of the night coming out of Untermyer Park, people who witnessed, as many as 20 people standing in circles, robed, wearing cloaks with all sorts of pentagrams and all sorts of candles and so on and so forth. I don't know what it was about the 70s that caused people to do this. Maybe it was the advent of heavy metal, Black Sabbath, a lot of drugs back then, of course. Not that there aren't today, but it was like a trend. It was like this satanic trend that went through the country, and a lot of people just did it for kicks. They'd get together in the middle of the night and they would burn a couple of candles and say incantations to the devil. But there was a hardcore contingent that took it very seriously. And we are walking right in the belly of the beast of where all that happened. So the 22 disciples of hell all came from here. So what happened to the Carr brothers? The Carr brothers ended up dying soon after Berkowitz was arrested. John Carr was in the military. He was found dead of a shotgun blast in his army barracks. I think he was actually Air Force barracks in Minot, North Dakota. And of course, Minot, North Dakota plays a big role in the Son of Sam story too, because John Carr also had a group of people out there that did stuff. And it is said that he brought people from Minot to participate in Son of Sam. I don't know how true that is, but that's just what was said. And of course, then there's the story of Arliss Perry. Arliss Perry came from Bismarck, North Dakota, and she was killed in Stanford University in California. And no one knows quite exactly what happened to her. It's still kind of a mystery, but no one was ever arrested for her murder. And the thought was that the group from Minot, where John Carr was involved, that they actually went out to Stanford and did that murder. And it was a cult murder. Apparently she got too close. She had some knowledge. Now what's interesting about that is that it rings true, because the first Son of Sam murder was the same deal. Donna Lauria. See, this is another myth, that it was random shootings. Donna Lauria, who was unfortunately the first person killed in this spree that became known as the Son of Sam, she was actually known to the group. The group would hang out at a nightclub in New Rochelle, a city that also figures into the Son of Sam story. But they would hang out together, and she was like tangentially known to the group. And Donna Lauria apparently was going around and talking about things. So she was the first person to go. These people took it seriously. There were some hits that were buried into this. Christine Freund, who was one of the Son of Sam victims. She was considerably older, and apparently there was a whole story there with her boyfriend. He was having an affair with one of the members of the cult wife, and they killed Christine as a way to get back to him. And there was two women, they were actually teenagers, that were shot on a stoop in Queens. Their name is Lomino Demasi. Sorry, I might have gotten Demasi's name, used it in a different context before. But Lomino was the last name of one of the girls, and Demasi was the last name of another. And they lived, and they gave a description of a man who was wearing an army jacket or an Air Force jacket. John Carr was in the Air Force. and he had the exact same hairstyle as John Carr, down to the part on his hair. That's how sure they were. And if you look at David Berkowitz, he had, you know, what's known as in the trade as a Jew fro. Okay, I can say that, I'm half Jewish, guys. All right, so I can rattle off some Hebrew. Actually, no, I won't, but I could if I wanted to. Anyway, these beautiful houses up here, gorgeous neighborhood. So we're coming back up to the Untermyer area, and happy I was able to get out here and do this today. Been wanting to do this for a while. My gardening season has started, but as I've noted in a few other videos having more to do with gardening, I'm basically running on fumes. The USA is a ghost town, and New York City is a ghost town, and really the life has been sucked completely out of it. Everybody's afraid of each other, and so there are a lot of landscapers working, no doubt, but they have to be masked up, they have to use hand sanitizer all the time. Pretty soon buildings are going to require vaccinations. I'm just not into it, folks. So I don't know what I'm going to do. I started my gardening school to sort of raise some income for me. I hope I get through it all. But I'm struggling. It just shows you how things can fall so quickly. 2020 was supposed to be my best year. I had reached really a very good point in this industry where I was getting really well known for my philosophies on gardening, on my high quality work. And I had 7 different large properties I was taking care of, and really had started to make some, for the first time in my life, some really, really good money. I was very, very happy with the way things were coming out. And YBG, what was I doing there? Teaching 30 to 40 classes a year, 10 different subjects. All that went bye-bye as well. So basically, the institutions in the system threw us all out, folks. They don't care about us. And so I don't know what my next move is. Wow, look at that house up there. Beautiful. But I'm figuring it out, and I'm using my time to do some creative things that I never had time to do before. And of course, this Son of Sam is one of them. I've been meaning to do this for years. So it's just very interesting coming up here and seeing these old sites. To me, they may not mean much to you. I would imagine that anybody watching this video came across it by typing in Son of Sam, and they might be interested in seeing the actual locations. But I'm just happy to be able to get out here and do this. So yeah, so once Berkowitz was arrested, the Carr brothers started getting killed. I said John before was found dead in Minot, North Dakota. His brother Michael was, no one knows exactly. He was run off the road somehow on the West Side Highway in 1979. Berkowitz was arrested and jailed in 77. So Michael went bye-bye. So right there, that's suspicious, right? 2 of the people who were involved die under mysterious circumstances. And then people who you didn't know about, the people who were associated with the group who, you know, were kind of nameless. Maury Terry writes about how a lot of those people were killed or died of suicide or drug overdoses. But time was not kind to the people who did, the people who were in the 22 Disciples of Hell. Only one time did I meet somebody in this whole deal where maybe I shouldn't get into it, but I'm convinced that this guy was a shooter. But I will never, ever, ever reveal a name because he threatened to shoot to kill me. This happened 2005 because I got close, man. Once I got into this, it was like I was meeting people everywhere. And you know, should have made it my screenplay, should have made my movie, but never did. So this is about the closest I'll ever come to it. Again, just showing you the belly of the beast, the places where this group originated, where they hung out, where they did most of their planning for the Son of Sam killings, where they did their rituals. And the belly of the beast, of course, is from Wicker Street to Odell Avenue in Yonkers, along Warburton Avenue, and the Aqueduct Trail, which is what we're on right now. This trail is actually the site of one of the wonders of modern engineering worldwide. This trail right here is what used to bring, maybe still does, I'm not sure if it still does, but it was the original aqueduct for the New York City water, which comes from upstate and is gravity fed down through this system of tunnels underneath where I'm walking. And that's what brought water into New York City, of course allowing New York City to turn into the huge metropolis that it became. One of the Son of Sam letters tangentially refers to this area. It was the second letter, and it said, "Hello from the sewers of New York City. Hello from the gutters of New York City." And the words gutter and sewer mean aqueduct, okay, waterway. So in this letter, they were giving up where they were, just that nobody was, with it enough to tell. The Son of Sam letters were actually very interesting because there was no way that Berkowitz wrote them. Again, not in his handwriting, not in his writing style. You don't change your writing style, even if you try to pretend and fake it. And the letters were written by somebody who was very well versed in architectural drafting and graphic design. A forensic writing analysis showed that just from the way it was written. And wouldn't you know it, Michael Carr, one of the brothers, was a graphic designer. They in the Carr household, they ran both a telephone answering service and a graphic design company. So that's a kind of an interesting connection. And the letter was written by a very intelligent person who was extremely poetic in their prose. Yes, crazy people can be extremely good writers. Oh, look at the deer. It's interesting, 2 deer. Hey, deers. Deers are a big problem up here in Yonkers, and especially a little bit more north of here in Hastings. They kill gardens. I used to do a lot of work up here in Yonkers and Hastings before I became a New York City dude. And I almost, I'm glad, one of the reasons I gave up on it was because the deer just killed everything. And it just wasn't fun to garden anymore. So there's the Untermyer Park again. We're sort of back to where we started. What's going on here? There's the deer. Where's the other one? Oh, right there. There they go. They're running towards each other. Fun. Sometimes I wish I was an animal out here. They just live, right? They live and they die. They're not worried about masks and distancing and treating their fellow man as a biohazard. How are we gonna survive as a society, folks, if you keep on treating people as they're diseased and that they're less than human? This is not going down a good path for anybody to support it anymore. The narrative is collapsing. States are opening up fully. And pretty soon, and also, if you just look at the empirical data, the states who have done the worst, if you believe the numbers, first of all, that's a whole other issue. Remember, I'm obsessed with reality, and I don't believe anything this government says. Remember, the same government who brought you Gulf of Tonkin, the Vietnam War, who shot Bob Kennedy, JFK, MLK, who were involved in COINTELPRO to get rid of the Black Panthers, although there's a whole other story, maybe the Black Panthers were actually a COINTELPRO themselves. The same government who lied about and perpetrated 9/11, the same government who brought you to war in Iraq illegally. In fact, some of the same journalists who cheerleaded the war in Iraq, which was a total debacle. The same journalists who lied you into a war with Afghanistan. Same journalists who brought us the financial crash. The same people, I should say. All of these things that killed people and maimed people and destroyed people's lives. Now, all of a sudden, they're telling us the truth about coronavirus. And it just so happens that 2 weeks to flatten the curve has turned into a year of flattening all of our freedoms. So if you're still into this, that's fine. That's your right as an American. But you really ought to check your head, folks, because all you're doing, you're playing the role of the good German. Hate to say it. And people who are fighting for freedom, people like myself, and really millions of other Americans out there who've seen through the lies, who know this for what it is, which is a scam, to basically poison us with their fake vaccines that are actually genetically altering us. Research mRNA. It's really evil stuff. We're being lied to. And it's really unseemly at this point. Maybe it was an honest mistake last year to think that masks and distancing worked and lockdowns worked, but at this point, if you're still into this, you are just a fucking privileged asshole, because most of us cannot afford this anymore. My business was destroyed. I know so many people, my students who were, lighting directors, people who were involved in the arts, totally now destroyed. Okay. Was it worth it? Just so you didn't get a little cold or a little flu, which is what most people get. Never heard of a disease where people who are perfectly healthy can pass it along and become super spreaders. Never heard of asymptomatic disease carriers before this. People are walking around with masks on where they actually think that they are protected. It's like some medieval belief. Like there's a miasma where if you breathe the air, you're gonna die. And then think about who in New York State was the biggest perpetrator of telling people their new ethics. Andrew Cuomo, Evil Eyes Cuomo. That dude deserves to be arrested and jailed. He's the one. This mask is respect. Coronavirus is death. First of all, I don't want to take ethical advice from a guy who said to a woman, "I want to see you eat the sausage." Okay, because there's a video of him doing that. Apparently he's obsessed with his hand size. The guy's a small, petty tyrant, and he's the one who's got us all at each other's throats in New York State. Okay, he's the one that destroyed my business. I will never forget this, and I hope that those of you who are on my side don't either. And of those of you who may disagree with me, that's fine. It's your right as an American. If you want to believe propagandists who've lied to you for 30 years on matters of your life, well, that's your right. You have the right to stay inside your house permanently. You have the right to wear your masks permanently. But stop giving the rest of us a hard time about it, because we're not a member of your cult. And at this point, that's what you're a member of. Anyway, getting back to Son of Sam. So, we pretty much reached the end of our discussion here. Hope you enjoyed this little walk and talk. Gonna head back to my car now. Got a really nice walk out of this. And now I'm gonna go do my food shopping maskless. I don't participate in this stuff. All right, and if you guys are worried about any of the ramifications of taking that muzzle off your face, just stop. We have to stop coddling the weakest. Society will never progress as long as we're coddling the weakest. Okay, and giving credence to these people's medieval beliefs about health and controlling the human body. All right, so can't really think of anything more to say. So we will just say goodbye. Thank you very much for watching.